Welcome everybody to our event, Seeing Opportunity in Devastation and Stories to Inspire, with my co-host Ed Hatton. And we are still basically discussing just the Entrepreneurial Excellence series. And last time we spoke about active listening and how this leads to boosting your sales. Now, this podcast was actually published in the YouTube channel entitled Griffin Enterprise Development, and you're quite welcome to go and listen to it. In essence, and maybe just an excerpt from that conversation last week was it encouraged us to take responsibility to engage with the people around us, especially our clients. I would also add employees and the like, all our stakeholders really, through intensive listening that keeps us on reflecting back to the other person until the meaning is clear and accurately understood, um, in terms of what the other person is communicating. And I guess we also discussed that it takes two things really: a curiosity to get to that point of having accurate understanding of what the other person is trying to say, and humility, which means you don't assume that you what you heard the first time is the right thing. You assume that your filters probably distorted the first salvo. Uh, and anyway, that is just to really go and listen to that podcast. It's phenomenal. So I know it. We've got something exciting uh, today to discuss, and over to you.
Thank you, Jacques. I just want to reiterate on the effective listening. It's much more than we think. Uh, Sitting in a one-to-one conversation, um, or having a telephone conversation or something like that, or even a clubhouse conversation. It's much more than that kind of communication. There are many formats of communication where we have to practice very active listening. One of the formats is a meeting that you are hosting or chairing where you've got a group of people. And boy, can we get wrong communications coming out of that. Um, because several different people might have several different points at one time. And we try and collectively put those together into one answer and all the other communication traps there. One of the other very, very ineffective ways of listening is client surveys. And the reason behind them being inefficient is that it's the company that writes the questions on the survey. And they tend to write them from what they would like to hear. Um, Unconsciously, they will write them from a company perspective rather than from a customer perspective. And we've all filled in um, customer surveys, which gives space for comments, but those comments don't go into the statistical information. So you're either very satisfied or very dissatisfied, and you're flagged either end of that. But if you try and explain that, those comments will appear somewhere, but they won't directly address your praise or your concerns. So be very, very careful of surveys. Try and develop them with the view of a customer in mind. In fact, it's often a very good idea to have some kind of an encounter group with customers where you jointly develop a questionnaire to do a survey. That may be that you then get answers you don't want to hear, but you should rather get them in the form of a survey than get them in the form of lost customers. And so often, the result of not being heard is people simply walking away. And you often never know that they have walked away or why they've walked away. But they've walked away because they weren't being heard. And I know you've done it, I've done it, and Most people have. We've just said, okay, not going to deal with that particular supplier again. We're going to walk away. We also touched last week on writing and writing skills. Uh, Not a particularly well developed art, especially in this day of electronic media where everything's too rushed to be very precise in your writing and to edit it very carefully. And I learned this when I used to write for Entrepreneur magazine and the Sanlam newsletter and a few of the others, where I would write an article and would go to one of their editors, and their editors are very, very precise in their use of the language, and would come back with red marks all over it. And at sometimes I sort of thought to myself, wow, do I really write that badly? And people had edited out or changed the wording to make the wording more clear until I learned the art of effective writing. And I could put it through an editor and they would make very few or even no adjustments to my writing. But that's a skill that not everyone has. In fact, probably very few people have. But one of the things that is probably worth anyone's while, whether they are entrepreneurs or salespeople, would be an effective writing course. It's one of those things that probably pays you handsome returns for the investment of your time and money in that course. Bit like time management. If you are an effective time manager, you're going to make a lot more money than you would as an ineffective time manager. And the differential will be far, far greater than the cost of the course in normal circumstances. Same thing with effective writing. Well worthwhile sharpening up your writing skills because we're not great at writing, and the more we go text based, the, the more we become the shorthand addicts, the more we try and convey complex meanings in something like a tweet, which has a very limited amount of space to express our opinions. So better writing is a well worthwhile thing to pursue, as is timekeeping. But I promised that this week we would be looking at setting up your company so that your sales force can be more effective. And that's what I'm going to go into now. So the question is, does your company, and the first tick in the box here, and you can rate yourself on a scale of maybe 1 to 5, does your company always deliver on its promises? Does your company always deliver on its promises? That's a very high standard to meet. And I know there are organizations that meet and, well, very difficult to exceed that, but to do better than you promised. But the average company falls down on its promises quite often. And criminally, they then don't advise whoever they promised that they're not going to make their promise. Now that's bad. That is seriously silly. Um, we we have to be better than that to get our communication improved. So, first question: deliver on your promises. Do you know what percentage of your promises you deliver on? You may find that out from a survey of your customers, but as I've said before, that survey is probably biased by your inputs rather than the customer's inputs in the format of the questions. The more likely scenario is that you keep a track on your delivered promises. What is the percentage of your invoices that have errors on them that are reported by the customers? What is your percentage failed delivery date and time? Do you know? And if you don't know, why not? Because if you don't manage that, if you don't have the quantity on that, how on earth are you going to improve? unless you're just okay that it's not really causing a lot of problem um, among your customers. So you feel that you're okay. If you're in that kind of mode, be very careful. It may not be causing problems among your customers because the ones where you have failed to deliver are no longer your customers. They're somebody else's customer. How many times do you conduct any kind of exit interview with a customer or a staff member or a supplier or any other stakeholder and find out why they are not going to continue as a stakeholder in your company? If you don't do that as a routine action, then you are missing a big chunk of information which you could use to improve your entrepreneurial excellence. It's a core thing in a company. Statistical information about failed promises is one of the things that should be high on your list of measures that you use to run your business, along with things like cash flow, because that's what is going to give the customer a good customer experience. And customer experience is what will drive them towards staying as a customer of yours. So put some measures in place. It's not difficult to do. Don't encourage people to hide their mistakes, as so many companies do. Encourage them to admit their mistakes and not get sanctioned for them unless they've been grossly negligent or unless this is a repeat mistake that they've made more than once before. But if it's if they missed a delivery date, let them just admit it. You don't want to beat them up about it. You want to know how many delivery dates you've missed. You want to know how many invoices people query. You want to know how long it takes for people to get a phone call answered, or how long it takes for them to get an email answered, or how responsive you are to your social media presence, how often you monitor it. All of those things are your promises. If you put comments out there on social media or put statements out there on social media, and then you don't monitor any comments that come in or only monitor days later, then you've left someone dissatisfied with you. They feel unheard, and you don't want that to happen because they may be a customer or they may be an influencer of customers. And that's just silly to let that go by. Get the measures in place. If you can measure it, you can manage it. If you can't measure it, then um, you're just not ever going to be able to improve. And this is what this whole series is about. Not about doing the things that you're doing well, but about fixing the things that you're doing badly. So that's what I keep pointing out is where are there avenues where you could be doing things better with minimal effort and minimal cost and showing an overall huge improvement. So rate yourself. Do you always deliver on your promises? And what is the customer experience like? How satisfied are they? And then the next point is how well do you know your customers' needs and your customers themselves? How well do you know who they are, where they are, what they do, and what their needs are? How many real account management plans have you got, especially for your large customers and your frequent customers? Do you even know what they do? Do you even know why they're buying from you? Because so many businesses shrug their shoulders at that question and say, I don't care so long as they keep buying from me. You're welcome to that view. But in my experience, if you don't know why they're buying from you, you are at risk of them going and buying from someone else as soon as that reason, which you don't know about, ceases to be a reason for them to buy from you. And so you might do something or fail to do something, and suddenly that reason that they're buying from you disappears and they vanish. And this has happened in many instances, especially with small businesses dealing with very few large accounts, where suddenly the large account just stops buying and nobody knows why. They'll give you all sorts of excuses about why they're not there, but they won't tell you the truth. So you should know who they are, why they buy from you, what their needs are, and you'll often in that kind of discussion find needs that are not being fulfilled in that customer that you can supply. So knowing your customer and knowing their needs. How do you do that? Talk to them. Talk to them. You can talk to them by surveys, but far better to talk to them by email or by face to face or by telephone and just have a general chat, especially with your large customers. You only have to do this with about 10 or 12 customers. Have a coffee together or a lunch or a breakfast or something and just chew the fat. And you'll get a very good sense of what's happening in your marketplace. The next one is how accessible are you to your customers? That doesn't necessarily mean physical accessibility, although that's important as well if your customers predominantly come in to buy from you. But it does mean that you need to know that your customers find it easy to access your business, to access information, to buy from you. I gave the illustration a little while ago about an organization that I was trying to buy from, and who was making it as difficult as humanly possible for me to buy from them. Now, why on earth would anyone do that? Why on earth would you put roadblocks in the way of someone buying from you? And yet we do it all the time. Because it's generally speaking not sales or marketing people who design the sales order processing routines. It is generally IT people who do that. So they put in what will protect their information and make sure that we don't get misinformation in there. They're not terribly interested in making it easy for the customer in doing a series of default operations. So make sure you're accessible. How many businesses are there where it is very, very difficult to go in and buy across the counter because they don't want you to? Very, very difficult to speak to a person in a call center because that's expensive running a call center. Far easier just to put an electronic FAQ and some kind of an information base out there and let you solve your own problems. Far more efficient, but not necessarily as good for customer relationships. Many skilled business people in the past have advised that you should call yourself up. You should also email yourself with an inquiry and see how it's responded to. You can phone, you can email, you can put an inquiry on social media and just see what kind of response you get. Often the first response will just be a bot saying, "Thank you for your inquiry. We'll we'll do this and that and the other thing," and someone will be in contact with you. And then you hear nothing further. That's not being accessible. That's being silly. So, accessible services. And then, how much do you know about the trends and the market information in your target markets? Assuming that you have identified your target markets, which may be with some people a bit of a bold assumption. But assuming you have, how much do you know about what's happening in that market? How successful are they being? How profitable are they being? Are they growing or declining or static? Are they happy that things are going well, or they're despairing that they're in a no-win game. And how often does that change? If we take the latest example of load shedding, many businesses are being absolutely crippled by that. And they don't have to be large businesses. Um, there's a small supermarket, a small shop not far away from where I am, where the poor guy is tearing his hair out because every time there's load shedding, he loses all his fridges. And all of his fridges have all of his cold stuff in it. And he has to throw away massive amounts of food. It also drives away his customers because nobody wants to drive around when all the traffic lights are out and where people don't drive very successfully in the pitch dark with no street lights. So he gets a lot of lost customers in those periods, and he also gets a lot of damage to his infrastructure. Now, yeah, he can put in a generator, but he has to put in quite a big generator to power all his fridges and his lights and everything else in the store. And that costs money, large amounts of money. Or if he's in a center, he has to contribute, and it's often very high contributions towards the center's generation. It's also a security risk during blackouts that criminals thrive on blackouts. We know that. So a thing like load shedding can affect your target market substantially. Have you talked to customers about how this is affecting them? Have you discussed what their solutions are? Have you heard what people are doing in their field? Do you read the trade papers of that target market? Do you read the blogs? Do you look at the YouTube videos that focus on your target market? Because that way you're going to be knowledgeable about your target market. This is especially true of salespeople. Salespeople should have all of this information at, at hand all the time. Sadly, very few do. But as I've said on a number of occasions, you can choose. You can either be popular on your social media or you can be rich. That's your choice. But to be rich, you've got to work at it. And market information is an absolutely key issue there. Does your company provide that kind of information to its salespeople? Does your company have future plans? Do you know what's coming down the line? When you will need new products? When you will have to modify your services? When you're going to change your sales channels, if you're going to? Or are you just waiting to get mugged by change and forced to make changes in a hurry? Is the environment you're operating in decline? Will you have to move someday? Have you got a plan if that is the case? Is the environment around you growing and successful? And if so, how can you take advantage of that? Have you got future plans? And so many of us, we're so busy with the day to day tactical management of the company that we just don't do these very obvious things. And we really should be doing all of this. So give yourself a mark in the box. How good are you at future planning for your company? How good are you at marketing information or market information rather? How good are you at managing your customers' accessibility to your business? Give yourself a mark. And if it's not 5, then go back and have a look at it and say, how can I improve here? Because that's the way I'm going to make some more money. And then do you train your salespeople routinely? Do you use the latest sales uh, skills, the latest methods of selling? And do they get that information on a regular basis? Selling changes. changes every few years, quite revolutionary change. And yet, some people have not trained salespeople for 20 years. They still are doing things um, that they were perhaps taught 20 or even 30 years ago. And they've got into the groove of that. And some sales trainers are still training in that kind of methodology that goes back 20 or 30 years. So keep updating your selling skills. The more skillful your salespeople are, the more poachable they will be. We accept that. Uh, but the higher the skill set, the richer they're going to get if they're on a commission basis, and the richer they're going to make you. So you can put them in a sort of golden handcuffs situation where they can't afford to leave because they're making too much money off their territory because they are highly skilled at doing what they do. So if you haven't given a sales course for your sales team in the last 2 years, give yourself a low rating on this one, somewhere around 1 or 2, and fix it. Get some updated and really highly skilled sales training. It's very expensive. Let's not make any kind of mistake about that. It is expensive, the best courses, but they always will pay off dividends. And the last one that I've got on my list is how good are you at sales support? How well do you support them with research, with all of the materials? How up to date is your website? How well do you understand your leads funnel coming in through your social media or your campaigns? How correct is the information in your FAQs if you have one? How informed are the salespeople about that? How accessible is the information about change, about new upcoming products? How is that done in your organization? How well do you support? And if you can do all of those things very, very well, well, congratulations. I think you've got a great company. Just keep doing it, keep doing more and making more and more money. But if you are weak in some of those areas, and most of us are likely to be, then there's something you can certainly do about it. As we've said in the past, Jacques, if anyone needs guidance on any of these points, um, yourself or me, we're very readily accessible. We're not hard to find. Please be in contact, even if it's just to have a discussion about it. So I think that's about run out of our time here, maybe a little bit over, I'm sorry. But yeah,
Ed, do you want to give your email address?
yeah, you can get me at edhatton.co.za, EDHATTON
Okay, and
.co.za.
alternatively, or you can also write to us on info@mufasacoaching.com. But sure, Ed, the checklist that you've just provided with us this afternoon, all I'm going to really say is that if you're listening to this, be courageous enough, be honest enough, and rate yourself not in terms of where you want to be, rate yourself at where you find yourself. See where the gap is and then do something about it. It is telling us that this series is about identifying the areas for growth. And when you do so, is tackle them one step at a time. So thank you very much, Ed. It kind of builds a picture in terms of what is desirable, and it gives us a way of benchmarking in terms of an ideal and then striving to achieve that ideal within the sales and marketing arena. So thank you very much for that. And thank you to our listeners. And it is usual, we leave challenged. Until next time.
We look forward to it.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.